Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepy Nature channel. Come in, make yourself comfortable. Pull your blanket a little closer. Let your shoulders drop just a little. Take one slow breath in and let it go. There's nothing you need to do right now, nowhere to be. The night is soft and wide, and you are exactly where you're meant to be. Tonight, we're going somewhere quite extraordinary. We're going to a place in East Africa, in Tanzania, where the water glows with the color of rust and rose, where flamingos stand like pink feathers scattered across a mirror, and where the earth itself seems to pause and hold its breath. We're going to Lake Natron, one of the most quietly astonishing places on our planet. Now, don't let the word extraordinary wake you up. This is not a loud story. This is a gentle one, a slow one, because even extraordinary places can be calm when you look at them from the right distance, from right here, curled up and at rest. Lake Natron sits in the Great Rift Valley, a long ancient wound in the African earth that stretches for thousands of kilometers from north to south. This valley was formed over millions of years as the tectonic plates, the enormous slow-moving slabs of rock that make up the surface of our world, gently pulled apart from each other, like two hands slowly releasing a hold. The land between them dropped, and over time, water gathered there. The lake itself is not very deep. In most places, it barely reaches 3 meters. You could wade through it if you had to, though you probably wouldn't want to, for reasons we'll soon discover. But shallow doesn't mean simple. Shallow here means something altogether different. It means the water is concentrated, intense, mineral-rich in a way that almost no other lake on Earth can match. The water at Lake Natron is what scientists call hypersaline and highly alkaline. That means it contains enormous amounts of dissolved salts and minerals, pushed up from deep in the earth by volcanic heat. The lake sits near an active volcano called Ol Doinyo Lengai, a name that means Mountain of God in the language of the Maasai people who have lived in this region for centuries. The volcano occasionally breathes out carbonatite lava, one of the coolest and most unusual lavas in the world, and its minerals seep down into the earth and find their way into the water. The pH of Lake Natron can reach as high as 10.5. To give you a sense of what that means, pure water has a pH of 7. Baking soda is around 8.3. Ammonia is around 11. Lake Natron sits quietly in that range, alkaline enough to be caustic, but not so extreme that nothing can survive there. In fact, some things thrive in it beautifully. Let your breath slow down now. There's no rush. The color of the lake changes through the seasons and through the day. Sometimes it is pale pink. Sometimes it deepens into an almost blood red. Sometimes it turns orange or a burnt amber. These colors come from the microorganisms living in the water, tiny single-celled algae and bacteria called cyanobacteria and haloarchaea, which have evolved over eons to love exactly this kind of environment. Where most life would struggle, they bloom. They paint the water with their bodies. from above, from a plane, or from the rocky ridgeline that overlooks the lake. The sight is breathtaking. Washes of pink and red and rust orange stretch across the flat surface, broken here and there by white crusts of crystallized soda called trona that form when the water evaporates in the heat. The soda rises to the surface and hardens, creating pale islands and causeways that look, in photographs, almost like snow. Let yourself sink a little deeper into wherever you're resting now. Let the image of that pink water settle softly behind your eyes. The temperature near the surface of Lake Natron can reach 60 degrees Celsius in places. That's 140 degrees Fahrenheit. The hot springs that feed into the lake from volcanic sources are even hotter. Standing near the shore on a sunny afternoon, you would feel the heat rising from both above and below, wrapping around you like the inside of a slow oven. The air shimmers, the horizon wavers, and yet, even here, life has found a way. There is one species of fish, just one, that lives in the hot, alkaline streams feeding into Lake Natron. It is called Alkalapia latilabris, a small cichlid, not much longer than your finger. It has spent thousands of generations adapting to conditions that would kill almost any other fish in minutes. Its kidneys work differently from most fish. Its cells have evolved special proteins that stay stable even in highly alkaline water. It lives in the margins, in the freshwater springs, where the alkalinity is slightly lower, and it has never needed to live anywhere else. This tiny fish is found nowhere else on Earth, nowhere, only here at the edge of this burning, mineral-thick water. If you enjoy these gentle stories from the natural world, do feel free to like this video. It helps more tired souls find their way here. And if you haven't already, there's a whole playlist of slow nature stories waiting for you whenever you need to rest. Now, close your eyes a little more if you'd like. We're only just beginning. The Great Rift Valley, where Lake Natron rests, is one of the most geologically active places on Earth. This means the ground itself is alive in a slow, deep way, shifting, heating, releasing gases and minerals. The Earth here is young and restless in geologic terms. New rock is being born. Old rock is cracking and sinking. In tens of millions of years, geologists believe, East Africa will split apart and a new ocean will form where the rift runs deepest. Right now, the process is invisible to human eyes, but the lake feels it. The water feels it. Every mineral dissolved in that pink, glowing surface came from somewhere deep and hot and ancient. It is a beautiful thing to be held in that deep time, to feel yourself resting in a world that has been quietly changing for millions of years, and will go on changing long after all our small worries have dissolved into the same deep earth. Rest now. Let the image of that pink lake settle around you like something warm. The lake has a shore, of course. Every lake does. But Lake Natron's shore is like no other. As you walk along the edge, carefully, gently, on the drier ground above the waterline, you begin to notice shapes, strange shapes, small and still and pale as chalk, A dove, wings folded, resting on a ledge of crystallized soda as though it simply stopped mid-flight. A swallow, beak slightly open, one leg extended in what might have been a landing position. A bat, wings half spread as if paused mid-thought. These are the calcified creatures of Lake Natron, animals that have died in or near the water and over time become coated in a mineral shell. Their feathers, their fur, their skin, all of it gradually encased in a layer of soda ash and trona, the same white minerals that crust the surface of the lake. They do not decay the way most things do. Instead, they harden. They become, in a quiet way, preserved. The photographer Nick Brandt was one of the first people to widely document these figures back in 2013. He found them along the shoreline and, with great care, gently repositioned them, placing them as though they were simply resting or gazing outward or just about to move. His photographs are haunting and tender at the same time. These creatures look like small monuments, like something between sleep and stone. Let your own body feel that stillness now, that beautiful pause. The process that creates these figures is called calcification, or more specifically, natron deposition. Natron is an ancient word and an ancient substance. It is a naturally occurring mixture of sodium carbonate and sodium bicarbonate, a kind of soda compound. The ancient Egyptians used natron to preserve mummies, collecting it from dry lake beds in their own desert. They understood intuitively that this mineral had the power to stop decay, to hold things in time. Lake Natron has been doing this same work, quietly, without ceremony, for thousands of years, long before the Egyptians, long before any human being walked along its shore. The lake itself is the oldest preservationist. Sodium carbonate, the main mineral in natron, is also what gives the lake its high pH. It is a base, the chemical opposite of an acid, and it reacts with organic materials in a particular way. It doesn't dissolve them, it coats them. It replaces the water inside tissues with mineral salts, filling in the spaces where cells used to be with a harder, permanent substance. Over time, the outer surface becomes something almost like stone. Not exactly stone, lighter, more fragile, but stone-like, a shell of mineral memory. Let yourself breathe slowly, in and out. The lake is patient. So are you. The animals you find along Lake Natron's shore did not suffer. This is an important thing to understand and a gentle thing to hold. Most of them likely died quickly, perhaps disoriented by the reflective surface, perhaps caught in a sudden shift of wind or weather. Some may have simply landed in the wrong place and been unable to escape the sticky, mineral-thick mud at the waterline. The calcification happened afterward, slowly, over weeks or months, as the lake's chemistry did its quiet work. It is not a violent story, it is a still one. These creatures simply became part of the lake's long mineral memory. The trona crust that coats the shoreline forms when water evaporates. As the sun beats down on Lake Natron, and in Tanzania's dry season, it beats down hard. The shallow water recedes, leaving behind the minerals it carried. These minerals dry and crystallize, building up in layers over time. In some areas, the trona crust is thick enough to walk on, crunching softly underfoot like fresh snow. In other places, it is paper-thin, translucent, almost iridescent in the right light. You might imagine walking there in the cool part of the morning before the heat rises. The air would smell faintly of minerals and warm earth. Your footsteps would leave soft impressions in the white crust. Around you, the lake would lie flat and pink and silent, with only the distant sound of wind moving across the water's surface. There is a kind of peace in extreme places, a stillness that comes not from the absence of energy, but from the presence of too much of it, so much heat, so much chemistry, so much geological pressure, that everything else quiets down in response. Standing at Lake Natron, you might feel very small and very calm. If you're finding this story soothing, do consider dropping a like on the video. It takes just a moment, and it means a lot. And remember, there's a whole playlist of these gentle journeys waiting for you whenever sleep feels far away. Now, rest your hands. Unclench whatever you've been holding. The first human visitors to Lake Natron were almost certainly the Maasai people, who have herded cattle across the Rift Valley for hundreds of years. They knew the lake well. They knew which shores were safe to approach and which would burn the feet of their animals. They knew the seasons of the flamingos and the times when the water was lowest, and the hidden springs where fresh water came up cold and clear from deep in the volcanic rock. The Maasai called this landscape sacred in their own way, not because it was beautiful, though it is, but because it was powerful, because it sat near Old Doinyo Lengai, the mountain of God, which sometimes smoked and sometimes erupted in slow trickles of pale lava, and which always seemed to be watching. To live near something so old and so alive, even if that aliveness was expressed only in heat and mineral and the occasional low rumble, would give anyone a sense of humility, of proportion. There is something good about feeling small, not diminished, just properly sized, just right. Now, let us talk about the flamingos, because no story about Lake Natron would be complete without them, and they are, in every sense, the heart of this place. Lake Natron is the most important breeding ground in the world for the lesser flamingo, Phoeniconias minor. More than 3/4 of the entire global population of lesser flamingos has been born on this lake. When you think about that, really sit with it, it becomes extraordinary. One lake, one highly alkaline, intensely mineral, scorching, remote lake, and from it springs the majority of a species that numbers nearly 2 million individuals. The lesser flamingo is a small bird compared to its more famous cousin, the greater flamingo. It stands about 1 meter tall and weighs around 2 kilograms. Its feathers are a deep, saturated pink, deeper and richer than the greater flamingo's pale blush. Its beak is dark red, almost maroon, and slightly curved, designed specifically for filter feeding on the cyanobacteria that blooms in alkaline waters. That beak is one of evolution's most elegant tools. The inside of a lesser flamingo's beak is lined with fine, comb-like structures called lamellae, which filter the water and trap the tiny algae and bacteria. The flamingo feeds by holding its beak upside down and sweeping it back and forth through the water, pumping with its tongue at up to 4 times per second, straining out a meal of microorganisms. It is a living, breathing filter, efficient, graceful, and perfectly adapted. Let your own breath find that same rhythm, slow and steady, in and out. The color of a flamingo's feathers comes directly from what it eats. Cyanobacteria and algae contain pigments called carotenoids, the same class of pigments that make carrots orange and tomatoes red. When flamingos eat enough of these organisms, the carotenoids are absorbed into their feathers and skin, turning them pink. A flamingo that doesn't eat enough carotenoid-rich food will gradually fade to pale, almost white. A well-fed flamingo glows. In this way, Lake Natron's deep red-pink algae blooms directly paint the birds that live on them. The lake colors the flamingos, and the flamingos carry a piece of the lake's color wherever they go. They are, in the most literal sense, made of this place. Do you feel the warmth of that? The way everything is connected. And the connections are not harsh, but soft. One thing feeding another, one color passing into another living body, one place expressing itself through the wings of 1,000 birds. Rest in that thought. Let it spread out around you. The nesting season at Lake Natron is one of nature's great spectacles, though it is a quiet spectacle, observed mostly from great distance, because the birds are extremely sensitive to disturbance. During breeding season, the flamingos build their nests on low mud mounds in the center of the lake, as far from the shore as possible, because the caustic water and the harsh terrain keep most predators away. The nests are cone-shaped, built from mud and mineral deposits, rising about 30 centimeters above the waterline. Each pair lays a single egg, just one, pale and chalky white, not much larger than a chicken egg. Both parents take turns sitting on it, keeping it warm in the heat of the day and the chill of the African night. The incubation period lasts about 28 days. When the chick hatches, it is covered in soft gray down. Its legs are straight. Its beak is small and pink. Within days, it is strong enough to walk. Within a week, the chicks from nearby nests begin to gather in large groups called creches, watched over by a small number of adult birds while the parents go out to feed. These creches can contain thousands of chicks moving together in a great gray-pink flock across the salt flats. If something like tenderness is moving through you right now, let it. These small gray chicks walking together under the African sun, calling for their parents in thin, high voices. There is something deeply moving about them. Feel free to leave a comment below if this story is helping you settle in for the night. It genuinely warms my heart to read them. And if you're new here, the playlist is full of nights just like this one, gentle and slow, and full of the natural world. Let your shoulders drop again. Rest your neck. The water temperature and alkalinity vary quite dramatically across the lake. The hottest, most caustic zones are near the volcanic springs at the lake's southern end. Here, the water can reach temperatures that would scald human skin within minutes, and the pH is at its most extreme. Flamingos avoid these areas entirely. In the north, where freshwater streams from the surrounding hills dilute the lake slightly, the water is cooler and less alkaline. This is where the flamingos prefer to feed, wading in up to their knees, heads down, beaks sweeping. They have evolved thick, scaly skin on their legs that resists the alkalinity, though prolonged exposure can still cause damage. Young chicks who stray into the wrong zones can develop mineral deposits, rings of calcified soda, around their legs, which must be removed by humans if the birds are to survive. It sounds alarming, but remember, in the natural balance of things, most chicks do not stray. Most chicks stay with the creche, guided by instinct and the watchful presence of the adult birds. The lake is dangerous, yes, but it is also home. And the flamingos have lived here for longer than we have had words for them. There is wisdom in that, in choosing a home that looks hostile from the outside, but holds exactly what you need within, in trusting the place that has always provided, even when it looks unwelcoming, in waiting carefully through something that requires care, and emerging pink and full and alive. The sky above Lake Natron is worth its own chapter because the lake sits in a low valley surrounded by ridges of volcanic rock and the looming shape of Old Doinyo Lengai to the south. The sky above it feels cupped, held in, framed like a painting. During the day, it is an intense, almost violent blue. The African sun at this latitude has very little atmosphere to soften it, and the light arrives hard and clean and bright. Shadows are sharp, colors are saturated. But in the early morning and in the long hours before sunset, everything softens. The sky turns gradients of pink and gold and pale lavender that mirror, or perhaps are mirrored by, the lake below. In those hours, it is almost impossible to tell where the water ends and the sky begins. The flamingos become dark shapes moving through a wash of color, and the white soda islands become bright points of stillness. If you could lie on your back on the dry ridge above the lake at dusk and just look up, the sky would feel enormous. Not frightening enormous, generous enormous, like a gift. Let that openness be with you now. Let your chest open toward it. The stars, of course, are remarkable here. Lake Natron is far from any city, in one of the least lit regions of a continent that is itself mostly dark at night. On a clear night, and the dry season brings many clear nights, the Milky Way rises like a broad, luminous river across the sky, so bright and so densely packed with stars that it casts a faint shadow. The ancient Maasai had names for the constellations that are different from the Western names most of us know, but they told stories about them. Stories of cattle and stars and the relationship between the living and the sky. There is something very settling about lying under that sky and understanding that every human being who has ever lived looked up at these same stars. that the light you are seeing left those stars thousands of years ago, in some cases millions, and has been traveling through empty space all that time, and has arrived precisely here, precisely now, at your eyes. It is an improbable and beautiful fact. Let your eyes close. You don't need to see the stars to feel them. The volcanic mountain, Old Doño Lengai, which watches over the lake, is one of the world's most unusual volcanoes. Most volcanoes produce lava made of silicate rock, the same general category of material that makes up most of Earth's crust. But Old Doño Lengai produces natrocarbonatite lava, a type made largely of sodium and calcium carbonate, which is essentially a form of baking soda mixed with minerals. This lava is the coolest lava on Earth, erupting at only around 500 degrees Celsius. Most lavas erupt at 700 to 1,200 degrees. It flows almost like water, thin and fast, and it is black when it comes out of the volcano, but turns white as it cools, reacting with the moisture in the air. This strange, pale, cold lava is one of the primary sources of the minerals in Lake Natron. Over thousands of years, water has dissolved these carbonates from the volcanic rock and carried them down into the lake, building up the extraordinary chemistry that makes the place what it is. The volcano and the lake are partners. They have been making each other for a very long time. Think about that partnership. The mountain breathing mineral into the water. The water painting the mountain's minerals onto the feathers of 2 million birds. The birds carrying that color across the sky to other lakes, other valleys, other countries. The connections radiate outward like ripples, quietly, endlessly. If you're listening to this on a phone or a tablet, you might want to lower the brightness a little now. Let the room get darker. Let your body understand that it's time to rest. And if you've been enjoying this journey, do check out the rest of the playlist. There are many more quiet places like this one, waiting to take you somewhere soft and still. Now, the dry season at Lake Natron arrives around June and extends through October. During this time, the rains stop. The rivers that feed the lake slow to trickles. The water level drops, sometimes significantly, and the white soda crusts expand across the exposed mudflats. The temperature rises. The air shimmers with heat. And during this season, the lake is at its most alien and its most beautiful. The exposed salt flats reflect the sky in unexpected ways, creating patterns of pink and white and pale gold that change hour by hour as the sun moves. In some areas, the soda has crystallized into formations that look almost like coral or like ice or like nothing that has a name. They crunch and crumble when touched. They catch the light and scatter it in small, private rainbows. In the wet season, November through May, the rains return, the rivers fill, the lake rises, the flamingos, if they haven't already, begin to gather for breeding season. The algae blooms redden and spread. The lake's surface deepens from pale pink to rich, rose to the color of a sunset seen through deep water. The rhythm of wet and dry, rise and fall, bloom and retreat. It is the heartbeat of this place. You can feel it even from far away, even lying here, even from the other side of the world. The heartbeat of a lake that has been beating for hundreds of thousands of years. Your own heartbeat is slower now, I hope. Steady and slow. Let it match that ancient rhythm. There are other creatures that live at Lake Natron, beyond the flamingos. Most of them live on the margins, the drier shores, the rocky hillsides, the freshwater inlets where the alkalinity drops enough for more ordinary life to take hold. African fish eagles circle above the northern end of the lake, where the water is less extreme, watching for the small cichlid fish in the shallows. The fish eagle is one of Africa's great birds, large, powerful, beautifully marked in dark brown and white, with a call that carries across water like no other sound in nature. The call of an African fish eagle is the sound of Africa itself to many people. A long, wild, rising note, then a series of yelping cries that echo and fade over the water. If you have ever heard it, you will never forget it. They build enormous nests in the tall acacia trees near the freshwater springs, nests that are added to each year until they become great platforms of sticks and grass, sometimes 1.5 meters across. Both parents share the work of hunting and feeding the young, and fish eagles often return to the same nest and the same partner for many years. Let the call of the fish eagle drift through your mind, that long, wild, rising sound. Then silence. Marabou storks are occasional visitors to Lake Natron, big, ungainly birds with bald pink heads and enormous wingspans, who wade through the shallows looking for whatever they can find. They are not elegant birds, they are practical birds. Their bare heads exist for a reason. Feathers would become fouled with blood and mineral when feeding, so evolution gave them naked skin that is easy to clean. There is a kind of blunt honesty to that adaptation that is, in its own way, charming. The marabou stork's wingspan can reach nearly 3 meters, among the longest of any bird in the world. When they spread their wings to take off, standing on the shore of Lake Natron, they look vast. They catch thermals and rise without effort, circling higher and higher until they are just specks against the blue sky. And then gone. Pelicans also visit sometimes. Great white pelicans, moving in loose, gliding formations just above the water's surface, their enormous throat pouches rippling in the wind. They are among the most beautiful flyers in the avian world. Effortless, slightly absurd, entirely themselves. Let your breath be effortless now. You don't need to manage it. Just let it go in and out on its own. On the rocky slopes above the lake, klipspringers pick their careful way between the boulders. These small antelopes, roughly the size of a large dog, are named from the Afrikaans for rock jumper, and it is an accurate name. They have unusual hooves, almost cylindrical, designed to provide a small, precise contact point with the rock, like a ballet dancer on point. They can stand on a surface barely larger than a coin. They bound from boulder to boulder with a lightness that seems to belong to a different kind of gravity. Klipspringers mate for life and are almost always seen in pairs. They spend hours in close proximity, grooming each other, grazing nearby, resting in adjacent patches of shade. When one is startled and bolts, the other follows immediately, not from panic, but from something that looks, in its simple animal way, like loyalty. There is something in that, in staying near what you love, even on rocky ground. The zebras and wildebeest that migrate across much of the Rift Valley do not come to Lake Natron. The water is too alkaline for them to drink. But on the dry plains surrounding the lake, you can sometimes see them in the distance, moving in long, quiet lines across the golden grass. They are looking for the sweet, mineral-free water of rivers and waterholes elsewhere in the valley. They know this lake is not for them, but they pass near it anyway, as if in acknowledgement, as if even they feel the pull of this strange, luminous place. Feel free to leave a comment if you'd like, even just a hello from wherever you're resting tonight. I love knowing that people all over the world are settling in with these quiet stories. Now, let your eyelids feel heavy. Let them rest where they want to rest. One of the most striking aspects of Lake Natron is its silence. Not a total silence. The wind moves across the water. The flamingos call in low conversational murmurs to each other. The occasional crack of soda crust shifting in the heat. But compared to most places where so much life is concentrated, the lake is extraordinarily quiet. The vastness absorbs sound. The flat water reflects rather than resists the sky. Even large flocks of flamingos move in a hush that seems deeper than their numbers would suggest. This silence has a quality to it. It feels intentional, like the lake is listening. And maybe it is, in the way that all very old things listen, not with ears, but with presence, with the accumulated weight of all the seasons and species and mineral-coated moments that have passed through this place. The lake has been here for hundreds of thousands of years. It has heard everything that needed to be heard. Now it is mostly still. You can be still too. Let us talk now about the water itself, not just what it contains, but how it moves, how it feels, how it behaves. Lake Natron is fed by several sources. The Ewaso-Ngiro River, which flows in from the north, carrying relatively fresh water from the highlands of Kenya. Smaller seasonal streams that run down from the surrounding volcanic hills. And underground hot springs that bubble up from deep in the rift, already warm and mineral-rich before they even reach the lake. The combination of these inputs, fresh from above, hot and mineral from below, creates a complex, layered body of water. In the early morning, before the sun has heated the surface, the lake lies still as glass. The air temperature has dropped during the night, and the water's surface is cool enough that mist sometimes forms just above it, drifting in long, thin scarves across the pink. As the sun rises and the air warms, the mist dissolves, and the lake reasserts its colors, first pale and silvery, then gradually warming into rose and red as the light sharpens. The way light moves across water is one of the most reliably peaceful things in the world. It asks nothing. It simply moves. The Ewaso-Ngiro River, whose name in the Maasai language means river of brown water, is one of Kenya's major rivers in the north. It rises in the highlands and flows south and east, eventually entering Tanzania and running into Lake Natron. Along its upper reaches, it passes through forests and scrubland, picking up tannins and minerals from the soil that give it its distinctive brown color. By the time it reaches Lake Natron, it has traveled hundreds of kilometers and carried the chemistry of all those different landscapes with it. This is one of the beautiful things about rivers. They are stories. Every river carries the memory of its entire watershed in its water. The soil it has passed over, the rocks it has dissolved, the rains that fell into it, the animals that drank from it. When the river enters the lake, all of that story mixes with the lake's own story, and something new is made. Let your mind drift along that river for a moment, down from the highlands through the brown scrub into the hot pink lake. The hot springs at the southern end of Lake Natron are perhaps the most otherworldly part of this already otherworldly place. They emerge from the earth at temperatures that can exceed 60 degrees Celsius, heavily loaded with sodium carbonate and other minerals. Where they flow into the lake, the water around them shimmers with heat, and the mineral deposits they leave behind build up into low, smooth mounds called terraces that look like something from a science fiction landscape. These terraces are similar in structure to the famous hot spring terraces at places like Yellowstone or Pamukkale in Turkey, though Lake Natrons are smaller and less dramatic. They are pale and chalky, sometimes tinged with orange or yellow from mineral deposits. They are warm to the touch if you can safely reach them. They are formed over decades, one thin layer of mineral at a time, as the spring water flows over them and evaporates, leaving its mineral load behind. Time made visible. That's what a mineral terrace is. Time deposited one invisible layer at a time until it is solid enough to stand on. There's a quiet lesson there, perhaps, for all of us trying to build something. One layer at a time, one day at a time, one night's rest at a time. The unique bacteria and archaea that live in Lake Natron, the ones that give the water its color, belong to a group called extremophiles. This word means simply lovers of extremes. These microorganisms have evolved to thrive not just in spite of the harsh conditions, but because of them. The high pH, the high temperature, the high salinity. These are not obstacles for extremophiles. They are home. The study of extremophiles has fascinated scientists for decades, not only because these organisms are extraordinary in themselves, but because of what they suggest about life elsewhere. If life can thrive in such extreme conditions on Earth, then perhaps life can exist in extreme conditions elsewhere in the universe, on moons with subsurface oceans of mineral-rich water, on planets with thin, harsh atmospheres, in places that seem, from the outside, entirely inhospitable. Lake Natron, in this way, is a small window into the possible, a reminder that life finds a way, not always the expected way, but always some way. The lake is a lesson in adaptability, in persistence, in the quiet miracle of being alive in whatever conditions are given. If you find these gentle facts as comforting as I do, please do give this video a like. And don't forget, there's a full playlist of slow nature stories waiting for you, perfect for nights when the mind needs somewhere quiet to go. Rest deeply. Let the lake be with you. Now, about the calcified animals. Let us spend a little more time with them, gently. The creatures most commonly found in their preserved state along Lake Natron shores are birds, swallows, doves, bats, small raptors. They are attracted to the lake's surface for different reasons. Some by the reflection of the sky and the water, which confuses birds into thinking they are flying above an open plain and not above a lake. Some by exhaustion, landing to rest without knowing what lies beneath them. Some by disorientation in the high heat. When photographer Nick Brandt published his images of these creatures in 2013 in a series called Across the Ravaged Land, the photographs stopped people in their tracks. The images were tender and strange and quietly beautiful. A fish eagle, wings spread, preserved mid-pose. A dove resting in perfect stillness. A bat with its membrane wings almost translucent in the light, delicate as paper. Brandt was careful to note that he had repositioned the animals, found them on the shore, and placed them in poses that seemed to suggest life, or the moment just before life ended. He was not documenting them as scientific specimens, but as art, as meditation, as a way of asking questions about nature and beauty and loss and time. Those photographs found their way around the world, carried on the internet from person to person, from country to country, arriving in the hands of people who had never heard of Lake Natron and who sat for a long moment in front of their screens, not quite sure how they felt, a little sad, a little awed, grateful, perhaps, that the world contained such places, glad that someone had gone there and looked carefully enough to see. It is good to be looked at carefully. It is good to be seen. The process of calcification is, from a chemical perspective, a form of biomineralization, the same broad process that builds coral reefs, seashells, and human bones. Minerals dissolved in water crystallize around organic materials, gradually replacing them with a harder substance. In the case of Lake Natron's animals, the crystallizing mineral is primarily sodium carbonate, natron, and the process is relatively quick by geological standards, though still much slower than human time. A bird that falls into the water and dies near the shore might be calcified within weeks if the conditions are right. The mineral-laden water soaks into the feathers and tissues. As the water evaporates, and in the heat of the Rift Valley, evaporation is fast. It leaves its minerals behind, coating each fiber, filling each small space. The result is not bone hard, but something lighter, something that rings softly when tapped, like hollow ceramic. These are not fossils exactly. Fossils involve a different, much slower process of mineral replacement. The animals of Lake Natron are more precisely mineral casts, a kind of mold and filling operation performed by the lake's chemistry over a period far shorter than fossil formation, but far longer than anything we experience as brief. Let the thought of that slowness settle you. The world works in time scales that make all our urgency feel very small. What other animals have been discovered in calcified form? Mostly birds, as mentioned, the most common visitors to the lake's surface. There have been reports of small mammals, including rodents and the occasional bat, preserved in the same way. Insects, being smaller, can be calcified even more quickly, though they are also easier to miss. There is a certain democracy to the lake's preservation. It does not choose its subjects by size or beauty or importance. It takes what comes to it. It coats what the water touches. In this way, every creature that has been preserved at Lake Natron, from the great fish eagle with its 3-foot wingspan to the small swallow no bigger than a hand, has been treated with the same mineral attention, the same patient encasing. That is a comforting kind of equality. Your breathing is even now, I think, soft. Let it stay that way. The shore of Lake Natron is not always easy to reach. The area is remote. The nearest town, Engarcero, is a small settlement, and the roads leading to the lake are rough and sometimes washed out by seasonal rains. Visitors who make the effort to come here, researchers, photographers, conservationists, the occasional adventurous traveler, must commit to the journey. They must want to be here. This remoteness is, in its way, a gift to the lake. It is one of the least disturbed large lakes in Africa. Its flamingo colony breeds successfully most years without human interference. Its extremophile ecosystems continue their ancient, unhurried work. The volcanic springs continue to push their minerals upward. The calcified figures stand or lie on their shores, waiting for no one, watched by no one, quietly being exactly what they are. This is what wild places ask of us, to leave them alone, to admire from a distance, to let them be complete without our presence or our approval. It is a kind of respect that takes practice in a world that has grown used to touching everything. Respect the wild things, and let yourself be, right now, a wild thing too, untouched and quiet and perfectly, exactly complete. The geology of the Great Rift Valley is inseparable from the story of Lake Natron, and it is worth lingering there, because it is one of the most peaceful kinds of knowledge, the knowledge of deep, slow, inevitable things. The East African Rift System stretches from the Afar Triangle in the north, where Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Djibouti come together, all the way south into Mozambique. It is approximately 6,400 kilometers long. It is where the African plate is pulling apart, splitting into two smaller plates that geologists have named the Somali Plate and the Nubian Plate. This splitting is happening at a rate of about 6 to 7 millimeters per year, about the rate at which your fingernails grow, 6 millimeters per year. And yet, over 10 million years, that is 60 kilometers of separation. Over 20 million years, 120. Given enough time, patience itself becomes transformation. The Rift Valley was formed by a process called rifting, in which the crust is pulled apart and the land between two zones of divergence drops, creating a long trench. This trench fills with sediment and in places with water. Lake Natron, Lake Tanganyika, Lake Malawi, all of these great African lakes sit in the low dropped floors of the rift. They are, in a geological sense, the same event viewed at different stages of development. Lake Tanganyika is older and deeper. Lake Natron is younger and shallower. Lake Malawi is somewhere in between. In tens of millions of years, the rift will have opened wide enough to let the ocean in, and Eastern Africa will become a new island continent. The lakes will become the beginning of a new sea. But that is far away, even in geological time. For now, the rift holds its lakes gently in its long, slow arms. Rest in that slowness. Let the deep time hold you. The rocks that surround Lake Natron tell a story of volcanic activity stretching back millions of years. The dark, glassy basalts and lighter tuffs, compressed volcanic ash, are visible in the cliffs and ridges around the lake. In some places, you can see layers of different eruptions stacked like pages in a book, each layer a different shade of gray or brown or rust, each one representing a different moment in the valley's volcanic past. Volcanic tuff, in particular, is fascinating. It forms when volcanic ash, ejected explosively from an eruption, settles and compresses over time, bonding together into a solid rock. It is relatively soft compared to basalt, and it erodes into interesting shapes under the action of wind and water. The cliffs around the Rift Valley are full of tough formations, tall, strange, sometimes almost human-shaped, called hoodoos or fairy chimneys in other parts of the world, though they go by no particular name here. They are simply part of the landscape. Walking among them, you might feel that you are in a very old story, one that has been going on for much longer than any human story. A story told in rock and mineral and slow geological breath. The air in this landscape carries a subtle mineral smell, faintly sulfurous near the volcanic springs, clean and dry, and faintly earthy elsewhere. It is the smell of a young planet still very much in the process of making itself, of a planet that is not done, of a world still becoming. We are still becoming too, all of us. Every night of rest is part of that process. If this journey is giving you peace, consider leaving a comment below. It helps others find this channel, and it means a great deal. And if you're new, the playlist is full of slow stories just like this one. Let your jaw relax, let your hands open. One of the less obvious but deeply important aspects of Lake Natron is what it means for the study of astrobiology, the science of life in the universe. The lake's extremophile microorganisms, its high pH and temperature, its unusual mineral chemistry. All of these make it a useful analog for environments that might exist on other worlds. One of the most intriguing targets in the search for extraterrestrial life is Enceladus, one of Saturn's moons. Enceladus has a global subsurface ocean of liquid water, kept warm by tidal heating from Saturn's gravity. The water of this ocean is thought to be alkaline, possibly quite highly alkaline, and to contain significant amounts of minerals, including carbonates similar to those in Lake Natron. The Cassini spacecraft detected water vapor and organic compounds erupting from geysers at Enceladus's south pole. Scientists studying Lake Natron's extremophiles are, in a real sense, studying what might be alive in the oceans of Enceladus. They are using a hot, alkaline, mineral-rich lake in Tanzania as a key to a door that opens onto the universe. Is that not extraordinary? That a small lake in a remote valley hosting flamingos and extremophile bacteria and calcified birds might be the closest thing we have to evidence of life elsewhere in the cosmos. Let that thought drift gently. You don't need to do anything with it. Just let it be there, warm and wide, as you rest. We have talked about what the lake does to the creatures that fall into it. The gentle preservation, the mineral coating, the still figures on the shore. Now let us think about what the lake gives to the creatures that live alongside it. Because for every story of calcification, there are 1,000 stories of thriving. The lesser flamingos of Lake Natron are not merely surviving in a hostile environment. They are living their most successful, most complete lives exactly here. This is their center of the world. This is where they return year after year, generation after generation, to make new life. The very chemistry that preserves the dead is what feeds the living. The same alkaline water that coats a fallen bird and mineral also grows the cyanobacteria that colors a flamingo pink and feeds its chick. The lake does not have one mood. It has many. And the different moods serve different purposes in the great slow economy of this place. The lesser flamingo typically lives for about 20 to 30 years in the wild. In those years, it will breed perhaps 10 to 15 times, raising one chick per breeding season. It will fly thousands of kilometers in the course of its life, moving between the alkaline lakes of the Rift Valley, Natron, Magadi, Bogoria, following the bloom of algae, the rise and fall of water levels, the availability of the particular chemistry its body needs. It is, in the truest sense, a nomad of the rift, a creature whose home is not one place, but a whole landscape. Let your sense of home expand a little too. Let it be wherever you are comfortable and at rest. The flight of flamingos at Lake Natron is one of the great sights of African wildlife. When something disturbs a resting flock, a slight change in wind, the distant wing beat of a predator, some threshold crossed in the collective awareness of the birds. Thousands of flamingos lift from the water at once, their wings producing a sound that has been described as a continuous soft thunder. They rise in a wave of pink and white and dark crimson wingtips, circling in tight fluid formations before settling again or moving off toward a different part of the lake. The precision of the flock in flight is breathtaking. Each bird adjusts its position relative to its neighbors in real time, creating fluid shapes that respond to the air and to each other in ways that seem almost choreographed. This phenomenon, flocking in birds and schooling in fish, is called murmuration in starlings, the word most people know. But the flamingo version is equally beautiful. Each individual is simply following simple rules. Stay close to your neighbors, match their speed and direction, avoid collisions. From those simple rules, the whole flock becomes a single, flowing organism. There is something in that for us too, something about how simple acts, being present, staying connected, moving in harmony, can create something far larger and more beautiful than any one person could achieve alone. Let that thought be a comfort as you drift. The diet of the lesser flamingo is almost exclusively cyanobacteria, the blue-green microorganisms that bloom in the alkaline water. These organisms are among the oldest life forms on Earth. Fossil evidence suggests they were photosynthesizing in ancient oceans as far back as 2.7 billion years ago. They were, in fact, responsible for one of the most profound transformations in Earth's history, the Great Oxidation Event, around 2.4 billion years ago, when cyanobacteria began producing oxygen as a byproduct of photosynthesis in such quantities that they gradually changed the composition of the entire atmosphere. Every breath you take contains oxygen that, in a sense, has cyanobacterial ancestors. The air itself was made by microorganisms not unlike the ones that fill Lake Natron's water with color and feed its flamingos. You are breathing the gift of ancient life, right now, in and out. That connection between the ancient bacteria and the air in your lungs and the flamingos that carry the bacteria's color in their feathers is the kind of connection that makes the world feel very large and very intimate at the same time, very old and very present, very wild and very close. It is good to be reminded of these things, especially at night, when the ordinary smallness of daily life falls away and you are just a body breathing, just a mind resting, just a presence in the long story of everything that has ever been alive. Do take a look at the playlist when you get a chance. There are many more of these gentle travels waiting for you. And if this one is helping you settle in for the night, a like or a comment is always warmly appreciated. Now, let your body be heavy. Let it sink. You are well and warm and safe. Let us spend some time now in the quietest hours of Lake Natron, the deep night. After the sun sets behind the volcanic ridges, the heat begins, finally, to ease. The air cools slowly. The flamingos settle into their resting positions, tucking their long necks back along their wings, standing on one leg, which, counter to what might seem logical, is actually a more stable resting position for a flamingo than standing on two, as it reduces the surface area exposed to water and conserves heat. They become pink statues scattered across the darkening water, perfectly still. The lake at night holds the starlight. It is a mirror, and the Milky Way writes itself across the lake's surface in pale silver and dim light. The calcified figures on the shore are invisible now, absorbed into the darkness. The hot springs breathe faint plumes of steam that rise and disperse. The air is still. In the deep of the night, the only sounds are the occasional soft call of a bird, the very faint hiss of the springs, the tick and crack of cooling rock. The soda crust on the shore contracts slightly as it cools, making small sounds that are almost like whispers. Let this quiet be around you now. Let the darkness of the lake be gentle. The Maasai word for night is usiku, borrowed from Swahili, the regional lingua franca, though the Maasai have their own word, ngima. The Maasai people who have lived in the Rift Valley for centuries are traditionally pastoralists, herders of cattle, which they consider their greatest wealth. In Maasai cosmology, God gave all the cattle of the world to the Maasai at the beginning of time, which means that owning cattle is not just an economic act, but a spiritual one. The herds are sacred. The land they graze on is sacred. The water they drink and carefully avoid is sacred in its own way, even if it cannot be drunk. The Maasai relationship with land is not about ownership in the Western sense. It is about stewardship, about relationship, about reading the land and the sky and the seasons in ways that allow both the herder and the herd to thrive. It is a form of knowledge built up over centuries, passed down in story and practice, refined by experience. It is, in its own way, deeply scientific, based on careful observation, pattern recognition, and respect for the limits of what the land can give. There is wisdom in that relationship, in living close to a thing and paying attention to it, in knowing what it can offer and what it cannot. The cattle of the Maasai do not drink from Lake Natron, but they move around it, across the dry grasslands and through the volcanic hills, finding the freshwater springs and rivers that are scattered across the landscape. In this way, the lake is a center point that shapes the movement of animals and people around it, not by attraction, but by avoidance. A negative space that defines the roots and rhythms of life around its edges. It is interesting how much can be organized around what cannot be approached, how a thing's intensity can create space around it. Not emptiness, but a particular kind of attentive, respectful distance. You can rest in that respectful distance right now. You don't need to understand the lake fully. You can simply be near it. The small fishing community at Ngare Cerro, near the northern end of Lake Natron, has a different relationship with the water. Here, the Ewaso Ngiro River enters the lake and dilutes the alkalinity enough that the small cichlid fish, alkalapia, can survive in the inflows. Local fishermen, members of the Sanjo people, an agricultural community distinct from the Maasai, have fished here for generations. They use hand lines and small nets, working the freshwater margins where the fish concentrate. The Sanjo grow crops, beans, maize, sorghum, irrigated by channels from the rivers. They have lived in this volcanic landscape for centuries, adapting their agriculture to the thin, mineral soils and the unpredictable rains. Their villages are small and close-knit, surrounded by acacia thorn fences that keep out the wildlife. Their relationship with the landscape is intimate and careful. These communities, Maasai pastoralists moving around the lake, Sanjo farmers settled near the freshwater inflows, have coexisted at Lake Natron for as long as anyone can remember. They have different relationships with the same place, different needs, different knowledge, different ways of understanding what this alkaline, flamingo-filled, mineral-rich lake means. And yet, they share it. They have always shared it. That sharing, the quiet coexistence of different ways of living in the same place, is perhaps one of the most beautiful things about this lake. More beautiful even than its color. Let your mind rest on that beauty now. Let your eyes close a little more. We should talk about water, not just this lake's water, but water in general, because there is nothing more soothing and nothing more fundamental. Water is the most unusual substance on our planet. It exists in liquid form at the temperatures common on Earth's surface, something that, given the molecular weight of water, shouldn't quite be the case. Most substances with similar molecules are gases at room temperature. Water stays liquid because its molecules form hydrogen bonds with each other, creating a weak but persistent attraction between molecules that keeps them close but not locked in place. Not a solid, not a gas, something in between, something flowing. This tendency to form bonds is why water is such a good solvent, why it can dissolve so many substances, including all the minerals that make Lake Natron what it is. Water reaches out to other molecules, forms temporary connections, and carries them along. In a way, water is the world's great carrier, the substance through which everything else travels. Your body is about 60% water. The water in your cells right now has been circulating through the world for billions of years, through clouds, through rivers, through the bodies of other living things, through soil and stone and ocean. Some of the water in your body may, at some point in the deep past, have passed through Africa, through a rift valley, through a place not unlike Lake Natron. We are all, in some molecular sense, made partly of the world's ancient journeys. Let that thought move through you, slow and easy. The water cycle, the endless loop of evaporation, condensation, precipitation, and flow, is perhaps the most calming system in nature to contemplate. Water rises from the surface of lakes and oceans as invisible vapor. It climbs into the atmosphere, cools, and condenses into droplets around tiny particles of dust or sea salt or mineral. It gathers into clouds. It falls back to earth as rain or snow. It soaks into the soil or flows along the surface until it reaches a river or a lake, and then it begins to evaporate again. Lake Natron participates in this cycle in its own extreme way. The lake loses enormous amounts of water to evaporation each year, far more than it receives in rainfall, which is why the water becomes so concentrated. What evaporates from Lake Natron rises into the atmosphere, joins the great global water cycle, falls as rain somewhere else, maybe nearby, maybe far away, and eventually works its way back. The lake is a pump, constantly moving water into the sky. In the dry season, the rate of evaporation is so high that you can sometimes see the shimmer of it above the lake's surface. The air slightly wavering, slightly thicker, as water molecules make their unhurried exit into the atmosphere. If you stood at the shore and watched very carefully and very patiently, you would see the water level drop millimeter by millimeter, day by day, leaving its white mineral signature behind. This is how the soda crust forms, molecule by molecule, day by day, layer by quiet layer. If you're enjoying this slow journey, do give the video a like. It helps other tired souls find their way here, and the full playlist is waiting whenever you need a quiet night. Now let yourself be heavy. Let sleep come if it wants to. The reflection of the sky in Lake Natron has its own special quality that photographers and painters have tried to capture with varying degrees of success. The flatness of the water, the absolute stillness that sometimes settles over it in the early morning, creates a reflection so perfect that it becomes disorienting. Is the pink above or below? Is the flock of flamingos in the air or in the water? Is the pale volcanic ridge a real thing or its own image? This disorientation is pleasant when it is harmless. It reminds you that the world is not as fixed as it usually seems, that up and down are conventions, that what looks like a boundary, the surface of a lake, can, from the right angle, become a continuation. The boundaries we draw around things are often like that. Useful, but not absolute. Real, but not final. The surface of the lake looks like an ending, but it is also a beginning of the mineral world below, the reflected world above, the living world between. Everything is, at its edges, more complex than it appears. Let that thought dissolve gently as you rest. You don't need to hold it. Just let it move through you like water. By now, you may be feeling the weight of sleep beginning to settle around you. That is good. That is what we are here for. Let me give you something light to carry into that drowsiness. The story of the hot springs. The hydrothermal springs that feed into Lake Natron are, in miniature, some of the most beautiful formations in this landscape, where the hot, mineral-rich water emerges from the earth. It flows over the surface and begins to cool. As it cools, the minerals it carries crystallize and precipitate, building up the delicate terraces and platforms we spoke of earlier. Layer by layer, season after season. The colors of these formations vary with the minerals present. Iron compounds create oranges and reds. Sulfur deposits are pale yellow. Carbonates are chalky white. In places where different minerals mix, the results can be strikingly beautiful. A sweep of ochre and cream and rust that looks, in the early morning light, almost like a painting done in warm pastels. The microorganisms that live in and around the hot springs add their own colors. Different species of thermophilic, heat-loving bacteria thrive at different temperatures, creating bands of color around the springs. Deep red near the hottest center, then orange, then yellow-green as the water cools toward the edges. These color bands are sometimes called thermal gradients, and they are, in their way, a living graph of temperature, a map of the heat drawn in living color on the Earth's surface. It is extraordinarily beautiful in photographs. In person, it must be almost overwhelming. Let your mind's eye trace those colors now. The deep red at the center, warmest and most intense. Then orange. Then the pale yellow of the margins. Then the ordinary gray and brown of the earth beyond. A gradient, a slow change. Like the way sleep comes, not all at once, but in degrees. First, the loosening of thought. Then, the deepening of breath. Then, the colors behind your eyes shifting and softening. Then, the quiet. The thermophilic bacteria of the hot springs are not closely related to the extremophile archaea of the main lake, though they share a love of extreme conditions. The hot spring bacteria are more similar to organisms found in places like Yellowstone's hot springs, which have been studied extensively since the 1960s and 1970s. In fact, the discovery of heat-stable enzymes in Yellowstone's bacteria led directly to one of the most transformative technologies of the 20th century, the polymerase chain reaction, or PCR, the technique used to copy DNA, which is the basis of modern genetic research and, more recently, many COVID-19 diagnostic tests. So, the hot springs of the world have already changed modern medicine. The hot springs of Lake Natron may yet yield their own discoveries, new enzymes, new metabolic pathways, new ways of understanding how life processes information and builds itself in the most unlikely conditions. All this from a small, hot, mineral-rich pool on the edge of an alkaline lake in the African Rift. The world is generous with its gifts if we know how to look. You are resting now in a world that contains all of this. That is not a small thing. The area around Lake Natron is not just ecologically important. It is also archaeologically significant. The Rift Valley is the cradle of human evolution. Fossil sites elsewhere in the valley have yielded some of the oldest known remains of human ancestors: Australopithecus, Homo habilis, Homo erectus. The bones of our ancestors were buried in the Rift Valley's sediments and preserved, in some cases for millions of years, by the very same processes that calcify the birds of Lake Natron: mineral-rich water, sediment, time. The footprints of Laetoli, found not far from Lake Natron, preserved in volcanic ash from Oldoinyo-Lengai's ancient predecessor, are among the most moving artifacts in all of paleontology. Made 3.6 million years ago by an Australopithecine ancestor, the footprints show a small group walking upright across a field of fresh ash. They were preserved when more ash fell on top of them, protecting them from erosion. They are the oldest known evidence of bipedal walking in our lineage, a family perhaps, moving across the landscape, their footprints pointing forward. Those footprints were made not so very far from where the flamingos stand today, in the same valley, under the same sky, near the same volcano. We are very old creatures walking in a very old landscape. Rest now. You are part of that long story, and the long story is doing fine. There is one more creature of Lake Natron we should visit before the night grows too deep. It is a small creature, often overlooked, but essential to the lake's ecology and remarkable in its own right. The brine shrimp, or rather, a similar organism called Artemia, does not actually live in Lake Natron. The lake is too alkaline even for them, but in the nearby saline lakes of the Rift Valley, including Lake Magadi in Kenya. However, the principles of their existence illuminate something important about Lake Natron's ecosystem. These tiny crustaceans, no longer than a centimeter, have been on Earth for at least 100 million years. They live in salt lakes around the world, in Utah's Great Salt Lake, in the salt pans of the Mediterranean, in the alkaline lakes of Eastern Africa. Wherever the salinity is too high for fish to survive and compete with them. Brine shrimp survive drought and temperature extremes by producing cysts, tiny, almost indestructible capsules that encase an embryo in a dormant state. These cysts can survive desiccation, freezing, high radiation, and even the vacuum of space, as has been demonstrated in various experiments. They are, in a sense, life in suspended animation, life waiting. When conditions improve, when water returns, when the temperature drops, when the salt concentration shifts toward the tolerable, the cysts hatch and the shrimp emerge, and the population explodes within days or weeks, from dormancy to abundance as quickly as a cloud passes over the sun. Is there not something comforting in that? In the idea of a life form that has evolved the perfect art of waiting, that can hold itself in a dormant, protected state until the moment is right, and then bloom. You are allowed to be in a quiet state right now. You are allowed to wait. You are allowed to rest. Back at Lake Natron, the system of life that has organized itself around the lake's extreme chemistry is a masterpiece of ecological specificity. Each species plays a precise role. The cyanobacteria photosynthesizes, fixing energy from sunlight and producing the base of the food chain. The flamingos filter feed on the cyanobacteria, converting it into mobile, pink-feathered energy that carries the lake's nutrients into the sky and across the Rift Valley. The small cichlid fish feed in the freshwater margins, cycling nutrients in the inflows. The birds of prey hover above, taking what they need, and throughout, the microorganisms of the hot springs and the alkaline open water process minerals, release gases, and quietly maintain the chemistry that makes everything else possible. Remove any one element, and the whole system shifts. It is delicate in the way that all complex, interconnected things are delicate, not fragile. It has been functioning for a very long time, but sensitive, responsive, alive to change in ways that a simpler system would not be. We are like that too, not fragile, but responsive, alive to the small changes in our environment, our relationships, our inner weather. That sensitivity is not weakness. It is the sign of a living system that is fully engaged with the world. Rest now in your own complexity, your own richness, your own quietly extraordinary ecology. The conservation status of Lake Natron has been a subject of significant discussion and occasional controversy over the past 2 decades. In 2007, there was a proposal by the Tanzanian government in partnership with a company called Tata Chemicals to build a soda ash extraction plant at the lake's southern end. The proposal was met with fierce opposition from conservation organizations, scientists, and bird advocates around the world, who argued that industrial activity near the lake's only significant flamingo breeding colony could be catastrophic. After years of scientific reports, public campaigning, and governmental review, the proposal was eventually shelved. Lake Natron and its surrounding ecosystem were designated a Ramsar site, a wetland of international importance, in 2001, and this designation provides some level of protection. Tanzania's government has, in recent years, shown increasing willingness to protect the lake's ecology, recognizing its unique value. The flamingos, for their part, continue to breed. The lake continues its slow, mineral-rich work. The extremophiles continue to bloom and color the water pink. The calcified figures stand quietly on the shore, watched by no one, belonging entirely to the place that made them. A like or a comment, if you're moved to share, truly helps others find their way to these quiet stories. The whole playlist is there for the nights when you need to travel somewhere soft and slow. Rest now. Breathe out. The lake is watching over the night. We are in the final hours of this journey now. The lake is settling into its deepest quiet. Let us walk gently and slowly through the last of what this place has to offer. In certain seasons, the surface of Lake Natron develops patterns that look almost geometric. Hexagons and polygons of different colored water separated by narrow channels of white soda crust. These patterns form through a process called convection, the same process that creates the hexagonal cells in a pot of simmering oatmeal, or the patterns of light on the bottom of a swimming pool. Warm water rises, cools, sinks. Cool water flows in to replace it. The circulation creates regular, repeating shapes. At Lake Natron, the convection patterns are made visible by the differences in mineral concentration and microorganism density between the rising and falling portions of the water. The rising water is slightly hotter and slightly more diluted. The sinking water is cooler and denser. The microorganisms that prefer the different conditions sort themselves accordingly, and the result is a pattern on the lake's surface that looks, from above, like a vast natural mosaic. From a satellite, Lake Natron looks like something an artist made, and perhaps in a way it is, an artwork made by heat and chemistry and time and life, without intention, without plan, but with a kind of beauty that has the same quality as intention. Let your own mind make its quiet patterns as you rest, the thoughts that come and go like convection cells, the gentle circulation of impressions. The name natron comes from the ancient Egyptian via the Latin and Greek, ultimately from the Wadi el Natron, a valley in Egypt where this mineral was collected in ancient times. The word traveled through millennia and arrived in the 20th century as the name of a lake in Tanzania. Language, like water, moves through the landscape of time, picking up its cargo, depositing it in unexpected places. The word flamingo also has a long etymology. It comes, most likely, from the Spanish or Portuguese flamenco, which referred originally to the Spanish region of Flanders, associated with bright colors and lively music. The bird's vivid pink color reminded early Portuguese explorers of the bright costumed people of Flanders. The word traveled across continents too. Words and water and minerals and birds, all travelers, all carrying the histories of the places they came from, all arriving somewhere unexpected and making themselves at home. You, right now, are at home. Wherever you are is the right place. The last flamingos of the evening have long since settled. The ones that were feeding all day, sweeping their inverted beaks back and forth, straining the cyanobacteria from the pink water, are now standing still in the shallows, their heads tucked back, their breathing slow. The flock breathes almost as one body, a murmur of life in the vast mineral silence. The stars are out in full now, not the stars you might see from a city window, a handful of the brightest ones, faint through the orange glow, the full, overwhelming, ancient sky. The Milky Way is a river of light from horizon to horizon. The Southern Cross hangs low in the south. Jupiter is a bright point near the horizon. The ancient light of ancient suns, arriving here, arriving now, in the same moment that the flamingos breathe in the shallows and the hot springs breathe their mineral steam and the white soda crust ticks softly as it cools. All of it happening at once. All of it happening now. You are part of now too. This moment includes you, the lake, the stars, the sleeping flamingos, and you, breathing slowly, lying still at the edge of sleep. If you have a comment or a thought about this journey, I'd love to hear it in the section below. And please do share this with anyone who needs a quiet place to rest tonight. The playlist has many more journeys like this one. Now, close your eyes if they aren't already closed. Let your hands be open. Let your shoulders rest. And now we come to the end of our night at Lake Natron. Not a goodbye, just a settling in. The lake is the same now as it was when we arrived. Pink and mineral and ancient and still. The flamingos are sleeping. The hot springs are breathing. The calcified figures on the shore are doing what they have always done, being perfectly, permanently still. The soda crust is cooling in the night air. The stars are reflected in the flat, quiet water. Nothing needs to change. Nothing needs to resolve. The lake does not need to explain itself, and neither do you. There is one last fact about Lake Natron that I want to give you. Not because it is the most dramatic, but because it is the most beautiful to carry into sleep. The cyanobacteria of Lake Natron, the organisms that color the water pink and feed the flamingos, are among the most ancient life forms on Earth. They were photosynthesizing in shallow, warm, mineral-rich waters long before animals existed, long before plants covered the land, long before the first fish swam in the first ocean. They were here when Earth was a very different world. Hotter, more volcanic, its atmosphere still being made. And they are here now, in this lake, in the 21st century, doing exactly what they have always done, absorbing sunlight, releasing oxygen, growing and blooming and coloring the water and feeding what comes to eat them. 2.5 billion years of unbroken life. 2.5 billion years of one small organism simply being what it is, in the conditions it was given, doing its work without interruption. You come from that same lineage of persistence. Everything alive does. Every cell in your body carries somewhere in its deep biochemical memory the legacy of organisms like these, single-celled, ancient, adapted to a world that has changed enormously around them and yet found the persistence to remain. You're very old in your way, very persistent, very capable of enduring and adapting and finding the conditions you need. Let that knowledge settle into your bones tonight. Let your breath be slow and even, in and out. The lake breathes with you. Its evaporation, its cycles, its long, slow breathing of mineral and water and light into the sky and back again. You don't need to do anything else tonight. You have arrived somewhere safe and warm and quiet. The flamingos are standing still in the shallow pink water. The stars are above and below, in the sky and in the lake's dark mirror. The earth beneath you and beneath the lake is old and solid and quietly, steadily alive. The calcified birds on the shore are not lost. They are held by the lake's chemistry, held by the mineral patience of a place that does not forget what it has touched. They are part of this place now, as fully as the hot springs and the soda crust and the flamingo feathers and the ancient bacteria. You are held too by the night, by the weight of the blanket if you have one, by the soft, generous darkness that asks nothing and offers everything. Rest, silence, the loosening of all the day's held tensions. The lake will be here when you wake. The flamingos will have moved through the night and found themselves, by morning, exactly where they need to be. The stars will have turned their slow arc across the sky, and the ones you see before sleep will have been replaced by dawn, by the first pale light of a new day. But that is later. Right now is just this, just the quiet lake, just the breathing night, just you, warm and still and sinking slowly toward the deep rest you deserve. Thank you for traveling here tonight. Thank you for your quiet company. Let your eyes stay closed. Let the pink water of Lake Natron drift in your mind, pale and rose and rust and amber, flat and wide and still. Let the flamingos be your last image, standing in the shallows, heads tucked back, breathing slowly, pink and still and perfectly at home, just like you. Good night.